Hi, everybody. Hello, everybody. We are here in two places. It's Wednesday. Thank you so much for coming down and joining us. We are all already here on the YouTubes, all of the three of us. But I'm just me on the Instagram at the moment, and that will never do. So I am waiting for the others to come down and join me and to request to come in. But there are people coming in on both platforms. It is so lovely to see you. Thank you so much. I have a request from Kat. Go live with Katrina Marchant. I will do that. Look at all the lovely comments coming in. Thank you so much, everybody. So many familiar names as well, which is very lovely to see you all. Ladies.
Hello.
Here we go.
Hello.
Here's one. Here she is.
My hair's tufty. Yes, I'm here.
Mine's tufty too.
It's just...
Hello, Philippa. Philippa, why does it... Yours always takes ages to come up. We don't know why. We can't work it out. Answers on a postcard.
Yes.
It's coming. Philippa.
She's coming.
Philippa.
Philippa.
Oh, hang on. Hang on.
Yeah. Oh, there she is.
Oh,
there she is. Why is my head so tiny compared to your heads? Because my head is massive. Why am I so little? Do I zoom it? Can I zoom it? Can I zoom it? No.
Maybe you're just sitting.
Am I far away? I'm far away. I'm far. It's little, far away. Big, close up.
Uh-huh. There we go.
I saw a question already quickly on the YouTubes, which was, didn't I already do a video on Samuel Pepys? Yes, I did. But why did a video on Samuel Pepys on my channel, which is a very different kettle of fish to this channel?
And on that note, I think it
on
might
that
be
note, shall I?
Time. Yes,
I believe I agree.
Do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, no children. No. Welcome to History After Dark. It's just gone 8:15 of the BST. It's still daylight for us. Oh, Philippa, because it's summer. I'm going to carry on disclaimering because Philippa's left the Instagram.
Oh.
Don't know what's happened there. I'm going to keep disclaimering while that happens. It's daylight here. Because that is the way the earth turns towards the sun. But we still call this History After Dark, and it has a purpose because it will be the darker side of history occasionally. We will attempt our very mostest. We'll be the hostesses with the mostesses to try and bring you some historical facts. But whilst doing so, we will be engaging in some depravity. We will be laying in the gutter of the filth, but looking at the stars of history in this currently our Deceased Git season. With that being said, though, as there will be profanity, blasphemy, bigamy, infamy,
bigamy,
zebras, if all that's going to happen, then I recommend that if you happen to be in an open plan office and you have a judgmental boss, put a headphone in. If you are in your kitchen, car, living room, child's bedroom, and you have at home with you in your presence a Timmy is a problem. Timmy is a dobber. Timmy is one of those small children that hears one thing one time and then commits it to memory. Timmy's got a mind like a steel trap. Timmy will hear something utterly depraved, know in some intrinsic level it's depraved, take that information into school with him and then repeat it to the teacher. The teacher, of course, will be a primary school teacher and thus will not know what the thing means. So she will break the cardinal rule of History After Dark because she doesn't watch it, because she's purity driven. She will Google the thing that she doesn't understand. First rule of HAD is don't Google it. If you don't know what it means on this channel, probably don't need to. She will then call you up and ask you why your child or the child you are caring for knows this term, and that's embarrassing for everybody. It will drive you to drink. Another cardinal rule of History After Dark is none of this is a drinking game, pals. It's not a drinking game. Don't Google it. This is not a drinking game. This will never be a drinking game. At no point will we ever make this a drinking game. However, if you cannot put a headphone in and you cannot sell your child, then what I suggest you do is you wait and watch us on the playback. You can either watch us on the playback on the YouTube or on the Instagram. I say that we are, frankly, past due for us to do an episode where we say something so unspeakably borderline illegally depraved that for our own freedom we have to yeet the footage into the sun. It's one English time before, but we are very much due another time. So always best to watch this live if you can, but at the same time, don't call up the school and don't get fired. The end.
Intrepid Frady Cats. It's a drinking game if we want it to be. You're bad.
I don't approve that message, but I'm assuming. God, I hope you're a grown up. Sweet Christ, I hope you're a
Kat, I
grown up.
love how your thing says jingle machine. Could you not today?
I'm just a
But you
jingle
could
machine.
do it. Could
Maybe.
you jingle the disclaimer?
Oof.
Oh, that's hard. That's
Yeah,
hard.
you have to have a little bit of time to find a way to.
I'll think about it. I'll have a think about it. Hang on, I'm crossing my legs. Carry on.
Okay, thank you so much for coming down, everybody. So we are already. This is Git number 16, I think. This is incredible. We've got Roundup Week next week.
P. It's Git letter P.
So this week's superb Git of choice is everyone's favourite cheese-burying, diary writing sex pest. This guy, I tell you
that
what.
Is the tagline. That is the tagline.
This guy's fascinating. What a life, honestly, this man has led. He was a bit of a last-minute choice, as some of you know, but we've had some discussions about him over the course of the last day or two. A bit fractious in places, can't lie. Mostly me starting it, but we are here with Samuel Pepys. We also have Word of the Week, and we also have Past Problems Post Bag. Oh, me Widows of Lancaster is over there. Not brought it over.
Mine's there.
Says cheesy sex pest.
Immediately no. Immediately no. Immediately no. Immediately no. No. Christ.
No. Also this week, perhaps I should attempt to not just lose it completely randomly over something that's not that funny compared to the most of the things. So anyway, oh look, David's come in to get me my Widows of Lancaster. Bless him.
Oh, isn't he? Isn't he
He's
a good egg?
He is.
Isn't he a good egg?
No, he's run away. He's run away. Keep him in a basement.
Fromage fromage.
Nice.
Another tagline.
Another that one.
Fromage fromage.
I did try. Someone was saying about having don't Google it merch. We tried. I think because it has the word Google in it, we just can't get it to approve.
Yeah,
there's nothing. So
computer says no.
Computer says no.
So
we tried.
Someone put. Where can the merch be found, Lisa? Where can the merch be found? You can find it on our. It's in the link tree.
On Linktree.
Yes. We'll go through all of those sort of bits of housekeeping and stuff at the end as well. Someone said, who else was a possible choice this week? We looked at the Pankhursts, but then we decided they weren't dead enough.
Dead enough. Yeah, they've not been dead long enough. Because if we do them, there are other bastards we have to look at.
We don't want our own rule, don't we?
Thank you.
Yeah, cardinal rule number 3. Everyone's got to be super dead.
Yeah.
Mega dead. Ultra dead.
Lucas to school this morning, he said, Mummy, you see that big truck over there? If you hit that, if that ran you over, you'd be very dead. I was like, what happens if it was just that car? Well, you'd be quite dead. But not as dead as if that truck ran you over. I was like, good. Let's not have these conversations at school.
This is also why family vlogging is a problem, because kids will say this stuff on camera and that will stay with them for life. That is going to put you on a fucking watch list. Chrissy over on YouTube, thank you ever so much for the super sticker. We are very grateful. We're very grateful. Hadrian, kids are really intense. I mean, mine's only 2 and he has regularly asked for knives.
Don't even ask what my 18-year-old is up to.
Kids are weirdly intense.
Yeah.
I was leading a school group the other day. We were doing things about pirates, and I did mention execution, and the Q&A essentially became how they were questioning me as to how I was going to murder my fictional husband, the merchant, who had brought all their ships in, because that way I'd be richer. This is what the children were asking me, how I'd kill my husband and get away with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, kids are weird.
People just don't take marriage seriously these days, do they?
We've got Irene, Chelsea. I really love Coca-Cola, and my child said out loud at a grocery store, "Mum, you're such a cokehead. I about died." Well, freak. Melissa, thank you very much for your comment, suggesting Richard II for the R word Git. Tis. Who do we have for R?
We have an R.
We've got an arse.
I'm going to put it in the private chat if you can't remember.
Yeah, can't remember.
You can't remember this one? Yeah, I spelled it wrong, but you'll know who it is.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you
sorry,
wait.
I'm sorry. We've got to keep him in because he is. But
Oh
yeah.
Yep. Do you know what?
I think
correct.
everybody, or a lot of people, think they know who R is going to be.
It's better than you've ever expected. There's going to be wickedy wow,
So
wild west.
we've already had one person slightly upset about the R that they think it's going to be because they don't think that person is a Git. Anyway, it's all subjective, ladies and gentlemen.
They're all Gits.
They're all subjective. They're all Gits. Yeah.
We'd worked this out already.
Should we talk about our cheese pest?
Talk about our cheese pest, yes.
Yeah.
So
our very own cheese pest. Our friend and yours, Samuel Pepys, the Parmesan fancier.
Okay, so I've got starty bits this week. Yes. I think yeah. Do go and read up some Pepys because he's fantastic. So he was born on the 23rd of February 1633 during the reign of Charles I. He was known as we said, as a diarist, but he was also a naval administrator and also an MP. He was a busy man. And I'll talk in a second about how he did very well to get into these roles, basically, because he had no naval experience initially, but he rose to be Chief Secretary to the Admiralty under Charles II and James II. So he was in that position for quite a long time. He did very well in this period under royalty, particularly bearing in mind that he oversaw and also sort of supported the execution almost really of Charles I, and then just kind of wrote in his diary that he hoped that everyone had forgotten about that. And he was going to pop along for the restoration and give it the thumbs up and it'd all be fine. But he was a very talented administrator for certain and a huge lover of books and cheese. He was baptised at St Bride's Church on the 3rd of March 1633 and he was born above his father's tailor shop. So his father was a tailor and the tailor shop was in Salisbury Court in Fleet Street in London. Now, his mother's name was Margaret. And he was one of 11 children. He was the fifth in the line of 11 children, 5 girls and 6 boys, which is quite a fair number of children. But obviously, as I'm sure you know, infant mortality is very high in that period. And by 1640, he was the eldest. So the eldest surviving sibling at that point. So he came from fairly humble beginnings, really, with his father being a tailor. His mother was the daughter of a Whitechapel butcher. We've known some other famous Whitechapel butchers, haven't we, going down through history. So he didn't come from a very illustrious line, but he had some good extended family that brought him into this situation. So, for example, his great uncle was a guy called Talbot Pepys, which is a great name. And he was a recorder, which is a judicial officer, not the instrument. And he was also MP for Cambridge in 1625. And his father's cousin was Sir Richard Pepys. Sir Richard Pepys was MP for Sudbury in 1640 and Baron of the Exchequer, which is a very posh job, from the 30th of May 1654, and also Lord Chief Justice, which is another very posh job, of Ireland from the 25th of September 1655, which is a very precise date for that one. So there was a lot of, although his family was sort of considered fairly humble, around him in his extended family and circle, there were a lot of quite notable people, and he was obviously able to really use this to his advantage as he went through time, as you would and as he did. But as I said, he was very adept and very able at what he did. Now, he lived obviously in a very turbulent and therefore very interesting period of British history during sort of the Restoration and the Commonwealth and everything. And the others obviously will be touching a little bit more on this, so I'm not going to go into that too much at the moment. But he did attend the execution of Charles I, and that must have really been, that's something that's going to stay with you, whether you support it or not. That was a monumentous occasion in British history, and certainly one that many people saw. They rose and they fell underneath this, and he did rightly or wrongly, quite well out of it in the end. So in terms of his education, he was quite well educated. Around 1644, he went to Huntington Grammar School, and then from 1646 to 50s at St Paul's School in London. The execution was in 1649, so he was still in education at this time. And in 1650, he went to the University of Cambridge, and he was admitted as a sizer. So that is somebody who, as an undergraduate, received some form of assistance, perhaps a scholarship or something like that, to put them through their university education. And he went to Magdalen College, moving there in March 1651, and he got a Bachelor of Arts in 1654. So well-educated young man. Educated young man. Now he entered shortly after this the house of his father's cousin, Sir Edward Montague, who was later the first first Earl of Sandwich, which is quite posh. And Montague was elected MP for Huntingdon in 1654. So again, you've got all these people in quite prominent positions around Pepys supporting him, giving him sort of information, advice, education, backing him, putting him forward for things. And he was also the first MP in the Protectorate Parliament as well. So he was quite a big role during the Protectorate. And he was the one that introduced Pepys into the court of Charles II as well. So as we see the Restoration. So this is really where Pepys is being able to start to rise underneath the Protectorate and sort of rise under Charles II under the Restoration. And we see him start to do really, really well for himself. So it made him wealthy. His career really started to take off at this point. He was Clerk of the Acts of the Navy Board, and they supplied and equipped the fleet. And so Pepys got a lot of money. He was going to get a lot of influence at this point. And you see this reflected in his diary. I'll come back to that. It's really quite interesting. So he was becoming very well respected. So for somebody who didn't really have any naval background, he was making a really good career in the Navy and was becoming almost seen as like a person to go to. And I don't know if Kat will be touching on this because she's doing leggy bits, and I'm sure Philippa will as well. But his career continued. So even once he finished writing his diary, this naval career really, really saw him through. And he was seen by a lot of people, including himself, as more proficient than those above him in his line of work. And he wrote quite bitterly in his diary about them, I believe, like a little bit bitchy. Like, I'm better than them and all this type of thing. So he was good, but he was sort of very well aware of his abilities, really, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. He had a tutor in arithmetic, and he made little boats to help him kind of map stuff out and teach him sort of nautical manoeuvring and all things like that, which is kind of cute, actually. So that helped him. He picked up on all these extra things to help him compensate a little bit for the fact that he didn't have the naval experience going in that, well, pretty much just about everybody else did, basically, when it comes down to it. So we have this young man. He left Cambridge age 22, and he met Elizabeth Marchand de Saint-Michel. I think I pronounced that right. She was from a family of French Huguenot immigrants, and she was a bit younger than him. She was 15. And on the 1st of December 1655, they married at the Church of St Margaret at Westminster. And they moved to Axe Yard shortly afterwards. And Pepys got a job working for a dude called, George Downing, as a clerk in the Exchequer Office. And this guy, again, quite prolific. He was well known. He was sort of rising star. He was very powerful, very important. He was an Anglo-Irish diplomat and a financial reformer, and who held offices. And again, we see this conflict. He's held offices under the Commonwealth, but also under Charles II. So these people, you see, they're navigating these circumstances. You think for a lot of people, either you were for the Commonwealth or you were for, coming back into the Restoration. But actually, there's a lot of people just cruising through this, just trying to keep, because they're good at their job. And people they're just trying to keep their heads above water a little bit, aren't they, and survive and do quite well for themselves. But yeah, so he and George Downing did things like he secured the Passage of Navigation Act, so protecting like the shipping and things like that coming and the commerce coming through, especially from the Netherlands, because there was lots of wars with the Dutch around this sort of time, which we talked a little bit about last week, didn't we, when we talked about William of Orange. And so protecting the commerce and maritime and everything like that. And it's him where we see the link to the name Downing Street, George Downing. Now, one of the things that this is quite an act of bravery. Pepys had an operation, which was scary in those days. Well, stop.
Particularly this operation.
Yeah.
Let's
So,
just quickly. Somebody asked how old Pepys was when he married a 15-year-old friend. He was 22.
22. So
Rotter.
not great. Not the worst we've ever heard.
Rotter.
No.
Not great.
No, still not good.
Okay.
Not ideal. Not ideal. Let's talk about his surgery.
I have to say, I actually
intense.
right. It's not great, is it? So from quite a young age, he did have stones in his urinary. I can't say it.
Urinary tract. Yes.
And I
kidney and bladder stones. We think.
And apparently, I found when I was looking at one of the sources said that his mother and his brother John also suffered.
They all seem to be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't aware that this was a hereditary thing, but maybe it is.
I believe there is. They think that there actually may be a kind of if it's in the family, you can have a propensity that is genetic, but it's a lot of it is diet, lifestyle, and stress.
Okay.
But there is a genetic. They think that, as with so many things, they believe now there is a genetic component to it.
Well, it would seem likely given that set of circumstances.
Yeah.
But so he was in a lot of pain, a lot of time, and I've not had anything like that, but I've heard it is just diabolically agonizing, just really, really awful.
When you hear about the surgery he had, you are going to if you've never had a kidney stone, you are going to recognize how fucking painful it must have been because he agreed to have the fucking surgery.
I'm not going into detail. If any of you want to go into detail, then feel free.
Yes, please.
Basically, he was in a lot of pain a good deal of the time. He was had a lot of blood in his urine, and he was in a right old state. And this had been going on for quite some time. And by the time he got married, he was in a right old state. So I think he was to be cut of the stone was the wording he used when he described it. The operation was known about, and it was known to be extremely painful and dangerous because of the nature of the operation and because it was the 17th century. So, what's safe, basically. And
no pain relief.
Yeah, I mean,
and also no antibiotics, like no disinfectant.
Yeah.
If this goes wrong, it goes wrong.
He kind of knew, really, that this could. I think, to me, this is a marker of how desperate he was and how all he saw in front of him was this life of pain and it continuing to get worse because he made the decision to go through this horrendous experience rather than just try and carry on with what he was doing. So he must have been in an absolute state to sort of
put in the comments if you want me to tell you how they did it. Put in the comments if we don't know.
Yes, he found a surgeon called Thomas Hollier, and his cousin was a lady called Jane Turner, and the operation was performed by Thomas Collier in the bedroom of her house. Now, the stone was removed successfully. And for several years, this is quite sweet. Well, sweet's the wrong word, but quite quaint. He was so pleased with how well his operation went. For several years, he had a little celebration on the anniversary of the stone being removed. The 26th of March, 1658, he had this operation. So the 26th of March, for a number of years, he had a little sort of celebration, the day of the stone removal, which was quite cute. I quite liked that. But yeah, for several years, that went really well. In later life, the incision did split in the bladder, and he had some problems with that. And there is a suggestion, because he never had any children. He was quite open with his affections, and I don't believe he ever had any children. Now, he didn't have any children before the operation, so it could just have been that he didn't have any children. Some people suggest that the operation may have made him sterile, but there's no proof of that. That's just one thing. Well, he hasn't had any children. Maybe it was that. So I don't know. So yeah, if you would like Kat to break that down for you, then please do. But I don't necessarily.
If you're asking for it.
Go on then, Kat.
Right. So
make me feel ill.
There is a chair that you are sat upon. It looks similar to
you've asked for this, by the way.
A set of stirrups. The surgeon will position you so you are on this chair and it sort of it's got no bottom, and your feet are put up and strapped in. You are then strapped down and your fundament is exposed. If you are male, I don't know how they do this with a woman. If you are male, they will create an incision between your ball bag and your bumhole. They create an incision in there. They go up through that. Bearing in mind, no anesthesia, you are white knuckling this bullshit. They go up through that incision. They find the stone somehow. I assume that's like rooting around in a big handbag. Rooting around, and then they essentially get a type of pliers-y kind of forceps, and they pull it out.
I mean, you did ask.
And then they do their best to sew it up without giving you a raging infection. Steve, you would be as pissed to fart on brandy. I don't believe.
That's
I
an
don't
idea of
believe
fat, though, isn't
the area is called the perineum, but I think it's funnier to call it the area between your ball bag and your bumhole.
Isn't it called the gooch?
Or your gooch. If you're common, it's called the gooch.
What do you mean if it's common?
If you're common, it's called. Having had surgery without anaesthesia, I don't believe that that brandy would have, because I'll tell you here and now, after they stopped cutting me open, fentanyl sorted it out. It took fentanyl. That's what it took. Brandy ain't gonna touch the sides, friends. Ain't gonna do it.
I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry on Instagram. I'm not hungry anymore.
Hang on. That's cardinal rule 3. No eating.
Come to us for more diet.
Oh, yeah,
more
don't
help
eat.
with your diet.
Yeah, ball bag and bumhole is in fact the medical term. It is Latin. Bulbagio bumholio is the Latin. It's called the taint in the States.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I prefer that.
I heard that.
Or potentially the chin rest.
It depends what else you're doing.
Cardinal rule number 3 is no eating during this. That's a new one, right? No eating. This is a no eating podcast.
Yeah,
it is right now.
Well,
yeah.
although we've just
no
done the bit
podcast.
for that. Sorry, late.
Yeah,
late warning.
Because it's a new rule. It's a new rule.
Yeah.
So
We'll
what?
add that in.
So there we go. That's how they did it.
A what?
A new rule. No
I
eating.
thought you said blue roll. Obviously not. No. Anyway.
2020 vibes, babe. Chill.
Yeah.
No. Having flashbacks. Loo roll.
No, we don't.
Paracetamol. Loo roll.
Loo roll pasta. Yes. Anyway. What a time to be alive.
Wow.
Anyway.
Right,
So
you're welcome. There you go.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
There we go. So
What did he do with it? What did he do
Merry
with the stone?
Wednesday. I don't know what happened with the stone.
Did he keep
I
it?
would have
He
thought
seems
he's
like
the kind of person to keep it. He sounds like the kind of
He
person.
seems like
to
the kind
keep
of creepy would,
And
to
put
be
it on the
honest, keep it.
mantelpiece. This is my
And
stone.
he probably brings it out as his stone feast and makes people touch it every stone.
Oh yeah,
feast.
on the
It's like,
26th of March. It's National Stone Day.
Here
Your
is-
birthday's
here
26th
is-
of March. Then
Do you know what I
Showing
think?
very
I think
special
we as
days.
had should do. We should put in our diaries for every year. We should celebrate the stone feast. It should be an excuse for us to get together and eat loads of food.
He used to drink quite a lot. You just
Feasting
thought
might have been
having
part of
something
the
like
issue, yeah.
well, yeah, you just thought drinking and that would have been something he maybe would want to avoid to try and avoid getting the stone again. But nah,
No.
that was
Nah.
exactly.
They've already made the hole now. Now
Well-
now he looks like sooty. They can just go back in quite quickly.
Clearly, it was ready and waiting to open up again at some point.
Yeah.
So,
I just
Daddy pig.
Pig.
Horrified.
Says, do you think
It
people
takes a
washed
lot.
it before we got them to smell it? I think it should be like, what do they do with what do they
Polished.
call it? Yeah, polished, but you know,
Tumbled.
put
Put
it
in
a rock tumbler.
Tumbled, that's it. Yeah, tumble is
Put it in a rock
stone.
tumbler.
Oh,
Put it on a
they're
fucking
green.
necklace.
They're green, aren't they? A friend of mine had one that filled her whole gallbladder, and she kept it, and it was green.
Why? Is it?
Yeah, but she kept it. I was like, what
Oh,
the fuck
'cause
did
it's
you kept that for? She was
bile,
like, I was
no?
just so impressive about. They were like, that filled your whole gallbladder. We were amazed. You don't get that very often. It's normally lots of little bits, and hers was just one. So she kept it. Just have her gallbladder removed.
I'm
Couldn't eat
sad now.
KFC for a long
I'm
time.
going to keep on drinking as much water as possible to try and.
Yes, apparently fluids help.
Flush,
Drink
flush.
fluids, friends.
So
Drink
dust
your-
and
Drink fluids.
dust and diet water all round, everybody.
Mhm.
Dust.
Dust
Anyone?
and
Anyone? Dust.
Dust.
Yep.
It's not easy, is it? No. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the diary because I know Philippa's going to come in for middly bits and she's talking quite a lot about the diary And obviously we know of Pepys' diary and we access it, and it's talked about a lot because he covers all these huge, tumultuous, big events that cracked off in this time period. And it's a really, really important primary source that we have, which I know Philippa and Kat are going to talk about. But I was just going to sort of, because I'm talking a little bit more about him and what he was like as a person and growing up in his character shaping and how he got into the positions that he was. It was quite sweet because obviously he wrote about all these big things in his diary, but there was a lot of personal entries and but like broken down into really finite things. So what he was doing that day, but not just, you know, like, oh, we might go, oh, you know, well, I did had, and I've taught Pilates, and Kat's been to work, and then we've been messaging about the talk. Oh, just doing stuff. No, like what time he got up, the fact that his cat annoyed him, that he knocked something over, an argument he had with his wife, who he'd been being a sex pest with that day. Yeah,
He stabbed him in church.
Yeah, those types of things. So big things, but also really like quite little tiny things. But that really is important because it's interesting in him, because it tells you not just about the big events of what was happening, which is really important, but day-to-day life. So his day-to-day life, and therefore the day-to-day lives of the people, that the stories that came with him. But it gives you an idea of the day-to-day lives of a lot of people, which is really, really interesting. So you think about this diary as a log of the Great Fire and the Plague and the Restoration and all these.
You're literally doing my bit, by the way.
Oh,
You're
God,
literally
I'm
doing my
sorry.
bit.
I'm sorry. I was going to say then, I won't say anymore, but I was listening to a lady talking today, Dr. Kate Loveman, and she studied the diary in depth. And what she said was actually as well, it's that, but it's other things that on the surface you don't even realize that you're knowing. So he might, for example, talk about how oh, we interviewed a servant today and we found someone, they're going to do that. And you might think, oh, okay, well, they've got a new servant. But then you sit and you think, well, why did they need a servant? What happened to the other one? What sort of things do people want to have servants for? And you can begin to extrapolate quite a lot of ideas about just what is inferred or even not said. So you can pick an awful lot out of it from almost just those little tidbits and how deep you can go in. But if you got about how it started as a financial thing, you got that bit as well. Oh, okay. I'll just mention that really briefly. So she said, yeah, basically, the diary initially came from like just a system of notes. He had to keep very careful, like notes of what he was spending when he was in and around London. And then he kind of started adding notes to that. So it was like he was almost annotating his expenditures. And then it just built from there and built from there and built from there. And then as his financial situation improved, as sort of time went on, and you know, he got this amazing job opportunity. It makes it sound like it's the 90s down the job centre, but he got this position under, you know, Charles II, and he rose. And so as his finances got better, he didn't need to sort of track it quite so well. So that meant he had more time to just write about all the other shit he wanted to write about. Like he knocked a candle over, or he was cross because he spilt his drink, or he had a nice new watch, and he wrote about that loads. And so, you know, we see the nature of the diary change from it almost being a financial ledger to being a possibly almost quite tedious blow-by-blow account of his everyday life, all the juicy bits and the gossip. He had good gossip in there because he hung around with some good people, because he didn't expect anyone to read it, did he? At the end of the day, he wrote.
Well, we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about.
So, but I wonder if he knew that people were reading, he'd probably be thinking, "Oh fuck."
That's an excellent question. We will get to that. We will get to that. So, trust and believe.
Yes. So there we go. That's a little bit of Pepys to begin with. The girls have got some fabby stuff coming up. But before Philippa comes in with her middle bits, she has something else for you.
Oh yes, my word of the week. Okay, I have to say this was a quickly sort of found word, but it reminded me when I was doing this why we started this. And someone, I think it might have been Maria, somebody asked us if we'd pick this up because of some of the words we use and some of the phrases we use. So I was actually thinking that perhaps, I know we ask for past problems in our post bag, but maybe we could also start asking if we're using words, or, you know, if there's some Britishisms basically that you want us to explain, then let us know. DM us.
Etymologically, we can do
Yeah.
that. Well, etymology
Yeah.
that.
Because otherwise we're just coming up with things like this. So,
Fun.
today,
I want something to do.
so this one just amused me. Okay, so the word is cattywampus.
That's
Have
great
you ever
already.
heard of it?
I've heard that word before.
I don't know
I've
what it
heard
is, but I
it.
love it.
Cattywampus.
I-
I've heard that word.
I read it and I was like, we need to get this into a sentence. And actually, you can get this into a sentence.
Would the sentence go along the lines of, I would have gone, but I was distracted by a cattywampus?
I suppose you I suppose you could. Although if it was a cattywampus, you probably wouldn't be that distracted by it.
Does that mean
I've
it's
heard the word,
something?
but I can't remember its definition.
Okay, so it means something positioned diagonally or askew. So
That's
it's
amazing.
but the catty bit is supposed to come from, it's only an early 19th century word, meaning diagonal, and wampus means this something flopping about. Hence why I think if something was diagonal and flopping about, it probably wouldn't. It wouldn't be that distracting for you, or you'd be wanting to get out the room anyway.
Or you'd want to make it not floppy abouty.
Well, yeah. So, but something.
Back to chin rests again.
Yeah.
So naughty.
Cattywampus. That's a great word.
Yeah.
I try and think of ways to put it into my everyday life now, but now the trouble is my only thing that I can think of is that it's a little bit naughty.
We've got one.
It's not
and we've got
supposed to be naughty, but we have made it so.
We've got one here. Timmy
we do.
snitched the teacher, and now things are all cattywampus.
Yeah.
Timmy snitched the
You could
teacher,
have
and now
that. Yeah.
as my grandmother used to. My grandma used to call it cack-handed. You've done
Yeah.
that in a cack-handed way. That's cack-handed.
Daddy Pig loves to dig. How would you make it stop flapping about, Catherine?
Don't Google that. Safe search only. Safe search only.
A cattywampus. Yeah.
Well,
I love it.
oh,
I love it.
Lucy Hockey says Hockley. Jules Hockey. I use that word here in Delaware.
I see people use it for meaning skew-if.
Skew-if, yeah, skew-if.
Skew-if.
But
It was the flopping about bit that got me. I was like, why's it got to be flopping about?
Like a windsock. It's a windsock, cattywampus.
I suppose if the wind's a little bit weak.
I used to go out with this bloke, and he had a friend who, you know, when someone just really, 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 really wants a girlfriend and they'll just ask anybody out. And someone said, oh, how's Dan's love life? And he said, he's been blown out more times than a windsock. And it still makes me laugh now. Oh, dear. Anyway, I love that.
There's been a lot of oral sex references happening in this. I enjoy it.
Right.
So
now then, onwards.
Onwards.
And don't spare the horses.
Yeah, right. Let's get going. Okay, so Pepys, obviously famous for his diary, and actually, I think a very big tick to him for this. I'll come back to whether he thought it was going to be read or not, but he started it on the 1st of January 1660, and it actually I say only because I think he lived another 30 years after he finished the diary. He only he only kept it for 10 years.
Sorry, someone's comment. Carry on, because if I read it out loud, it's all going to go horribly wrong. Keep going.
Okay. So yeah, and it is from Pepys's diary that we get first-hand accounts of many significant events. So the Restoration, we get Charles II's coronation, down to well, I'll come back to Charles II's coronation actually. Execution of the regicide. So he did attend, we know, the execution of Charles I, but he also attended the executions of the regicides. And and there is so we get, I don't know if I took the I did. So that's October 1660, the year of the Restoration. So Charles II got on with it, and there is a I think he might have been the last man to die, Major General Harrison. There were a number of them hung, drawn and quartered at Charing Cross, which is where Charles I's statue actually sits now. They've since decided to call it the Charles I Island or something. They hadn't named it for bloody ages, and they didn't do anything about what this statue was. But anyway, he is sitting on the point at which the regicides were hung, drawn and quartered, excuse me. Anyway, so we have descriptions of a public execution due to Pepys. Thanks to Pepys. It's a bit bizarre because he's saying Major General Harrison looked as cheerful as any man could do in that condition. But you also get feedback about the crowd. So when they lifted his head up, the crowds were cheering, great shouts of joy. And you're just like, oh my God. So it's quite vivid. He's keeping this diary, and it's really it gives us such insight. But yeah, you've got the execution of regicides, the Great Plague of 1665. Because he's living in London, he lives on Seething Lane, which isn't that far from the Tower of London. There is a street called Pepys Street now, actually. Obviously, that wasn't there at the time. And because I think there was, I think the area took some hits during the Blitz, so the street layout is slightly different. But the church that he went to and is buried in, St. Olave's, is still there, so you can still visit that. But yeah, so he's living right in the city. So his account of the Great Plague of 1665 is obviously firsthand, and the Great Fire of 1666, which I've used lots because I did a walking tour, audible walking tour of Great Fire of London, and relied heavily actually on his diary. And I must give a shout out before I forget to pepysdiary.com, which has the entirety of Pepys' diary along with annotations and notes from people, and you can comment on it and you can search. Anyway, I always must mention them because I do use that site a lot. So yeah, so we've got the significant large events, and like Catherine says, right down to kind of just societal events. So we know that he went to the theatre, we know that he talks about the taverns, so we know where they are, we know where the theatres were. We know that James, when he was James Duke of York, had a theatre in his home that he went to, down to really just personal details as well. But it's from him we get things like the fact we know that, and I know, Kat, you've covered this before, that Catherine de Valois was what's the word? Was
disinterred.
Was disinterred and accessible if you went over to Westminster Abbey, because Pepys accessed Catherine de Valois and kissed her. Yeah, on his 36th birthday, he tells us that he kissed a queen.
Happy birthday, you pervert.
He kissed a queen. His wife's there. I'm wondering what she makes of him, because it just seems like she's just like, oh, whatever.
She's probably like, I was 14 when I met you, and look what I'm fucking stuck with now.
Yeah. So he talks about that, but it gives quite a detailed account. So blah blah blah, see the tombs, da 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 da. And here we did see, by particular favour, the body of Queen Catherine of Valois, and I had the upper part of her body in my hands, and I did kiss her mouth, reflecting upon it that I did kiss a queen, and that it was my birthday, 36 years old, that I did first kiss a queen. Oh, like, okay.
First and last, Peepsy baby. You aren't still going to live in Queens, babe.
Yeah. I have to be well dead by the time Pepys gets to kiss them.
Yeah.
She was fairly dead. Fairly dead. The Great Fire of London, going back to that again, because what I've done is I've just taken some extracts from his diary, so you can kind of get an idea of just how good some of his descriptions are. And to be fair to him, he doesn't run away from these things. He's in London for the plague. He's in London for the Great Fire, so he can give these accounts. And so we know things like people didn't move from their homes during the Great Fire of London. We know that they didn't go until they absolutely had to. Such was the disbelief that it was actually as bad as it was. Fires broke out in London all the time, but in fact, Pepys himself, the first night of being told that there's the fire, says he went back to bed thinking, oh, it's over there. The fire actually gets to the end of Seething Lane, and it gets very close to the Tower of London, so which had all the gunpowder, so that would have been catastrophic. Yes. The heat was so much that barrels of whatever down in the I was going to say docks, but what do you call them? Where all the warehouses were, they were exploding without the fire even getting to them. So that was, the heat from the fire. Anyway, so he describes all this. He says that the streets were full of nothing but people and horses, carts loaded with goods. So we know people were trying to get their stuff out on carts. It was pandemonium. He says, with one's face in the wind, we were almost burned with the shower of fire drops. So you got quite poetic there, I felt. It's not generally poetic, but I thought that was quite cool. So he's really, Pepys is in direct contact as well, we should say, with Charles II and with James, Duke of York. So he's the one who goes off and tells Charles II that it really has got bad. You need to come. And so we have an account of them on a barge on the river, directing and giving orders. So we know that they're involved from his account. And there is also an interesting, I think, little insight into Charles II. So he went to Whitehall Chapel, where one Dr. Crofts made an indifferent sermon, and after it an anthem, ill sung, which made the king laugh. So you've just got this image of the king just like sniggering like a schoolboy because the sermon, the pastor, whatever it is, just can't sing and he's trying to deliver this anthem and he can't do it. So we get that from him. And he does talk about being cut for the stone, celebrating being cut for the stone, like Catherine said, every year. The house that Catherine was talking about, so his cousin Mrs. Turner's house, I believe burnt down during the Great Fire. So I'm not quite sure. I think he still drank to the cutting of the stone on or around that date every year. But we get really sort of intimate details just about, in terms of like exactly what kind of person he was. He definitely liked to drink. Oh my God. He talks about waking up soaked in his own vomit in one bit. So we know that they liked to party.
Which is always good when you've got kidney stone issues.
You would have thought it would put you off. Yeah, you would have thought. Yeah. And he was in someone else's house, but no, they carry on and just get absolutely wasted. So you get all this really sort of intimate, but it's interesting because of course that's then showing what that level of society, what sort of things they did socially, what kind of behavior was, if not acceptable, happening anyway. So I thought that was gross but funny. And there's another also we have an entire recipe for a disaster. Concoction, I'd say concoction for kidney or bladder ulcers. So he still did have some issues, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's actually quite long, but he so in his diary he kept the slip that the doctor had given him of this entire recipe, which included marshmallows, which I've never seen a real marshmallow. Any of you, anyone, do you know what one is like?
It's a plant, isn't it? It's like a plant.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yes, it's
I just thought a marshmallow was a piece of foamy confectionery.
No, he's talking about the plant. He's talking about the
Yeah.
plant. I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but he is talking about the plant marshmallow.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Roots of marshmallow.
I can't tell you what it looks like. But it's like it's a root. I don't know what that means though.
Yeah, licorice. St. John's wort, and it goes on. It has a lot of stuff in it, including red roses, nutmeg. But it's like you can see what kind of things they were using as medicines, which I think is rather fascinating. So he keeps the diary for 10 years. The reason he decides to stop is that he feels like his eyesight is failing him, and that he thinks writing his diary every evening in candlelight is probably putting too much of a strain on his eyes, so he stops. And he does, I think, dictate little bits of things, but I think that whole process of having to say it out loud to somebody else to write down, I think probably self-censored quite significantly. However, he must have recognized that his accounts of, I mean, we've gone through some of the events, so clearly he's going to know that they're significant events, but he must have realized that his accounts of these were going to be useful or interesting to people in the future. So no, he's not that keen on people reading it or knowing his business in and of the time. However, he gets his diaries bound. He includes them because he is a bibliophile, so I think Kat will probably talk about this. So he has a massive collection of books that he leaves. It's all catalogued very clearly, and it includes his diaries. So he clearly had an idea that they would get read, that they must be useful to someone in the future, and for that he is actually sort of considered a historian as well as just is referred to as a diarist, but actually why not a historian? I mean, he's I suppose because he's taken the notes in the time, but he recognized that their significance. So although the diary only took up 10 years of his life, and I think he lives for another 30 after or so, and his eyesight never does go, but clearly it worried him enough to.
He's a drama queen, so he thought he was going to.
He possibly. Well, he was probably just pissed every night and thought, "Oh, my eyes, my eyesight's going.
My vision's blurred." No, mate, you're shit faced.
Yeah,
have a nap.
That was all it was.
In the morning, dickhead.
Had more. But it's really worth having a read. What did I say it was called? Pepysdiary.com is really worth a visit. What I couldn't find though, and maybe I just haven't looked hard enough, is he's supposed to be quite detailed in his accounts of his amorous liaisons, of which he has many, and yet I actually haven't found the actual words.
Okay, here's the reason why that is. Here's the reason why is because pepysdiary.com, what you are seeing as the text is a later edition that was censored.
Yes,
for later eyes.
Okay, so we need to go
elsewhere. But if you check the footnote of pepysdiary.com, they've got the original text.
Right, that's where I need to look then. Yeah,
to find the nasty. The nasty.
We're all just going to make a note of that for later.
Yeah. So I think if it's sort of, if there's a kind of the little number thing, sometimes if you click on that, it will take you straight to the dirty.
I'll have a look. Fill you all in.
But yeah, they did clean. The person who produced the edition, one of the first.
Wasn't that in the Victorian? Is that Victorian? And they went, or the one of them wasn't it? And they cleaned it up.
Oh, it's always the Victorians with their faux sensibilities,
their faux prudishness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
don't believe
good
stuff.
Pretty thick. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't believe a word of it.
So there you go. I'm going to leave it there, so that we're going to we're trying to keep to time. It's
going well, depending on how you define well.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a bit of text of the filth, so I will share that in my leggy bits. Cool. My leggy bits is going to be some pickup sticks as well. So we'll do. I
think it's just going back to the thing, just very briefly, is that there was, as the weeks go by, more and more we go, there's so many things about these people. We're finding it harder to leave stuff out than choosing what to put in. Read widely, people. Read widely.
He is incredibly interesting.
There's
There's
a lot.
very
He's
full
textually
life.
dense.
Yeah.
Like in terms of his life and time, and I'm not so.
Fashion.
There's a density around him of kind of canon literature that simply cannot be covered in just over an hour with three ladies who like to swear on the internet. That's just not. It's just not possible. But hopefully, with all of the Gits, there's some food for thought, some laughs,
Well,
and
yeah.
maybe it'll inspire you to go and
What
look
do you
into
do
them
for a
more.
living?
Maybe-
I swear on the internet.
Now we're
Yeah.
monetized, and of course you can also support us and buy me a coffee. The more we're monetized, the more time we'll have to do perhaps some more in-depth stuff if people want it.
Yeah. And we can answer Q&As as well. We can do Q&As about particular topics. But before we get into my leggy bits, which is going to be there's going to be some round robin of like pickup sticks. We do have.
I'm gonna start
It's
rustling
time.
now. Sorry.
It's
time.
time. Hang on,
It's time.
because I need to arrange myself. Do I have to have this on my face?
Yes.
For fuck's sake.
How many times do you have to talk about this, wench?
Obviously.
Well, as many times until actually one of you goes, "Oh, all right then, let her off." That's how
No.
many times.
We have been torturing you with the threat of a Winnebago. Do you really think we're going to let you off this? Fuck off. Grow up. Grow up. Right. You've got the
I'm
PPP.
things. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it's shit twice. I hate this thing. I
don't like the way it
hate
makes it all very big.
I hate it.
There you go.
Right, hang on. Where is it? Here we go. Are you bracing yourselves?
I'm braced. I'm channeling. We are the widows of Lancaster. We are channeling the widows of Lancaster to answer your past problems postbag.
Dear
Let's do
See what they
this.
say.
Dear History After Dark ladies, I have a young son who's almost of age to go to boarding school, as any young
Good.
gentleman should.
Mm.
Before I send my son off, I would like to have him inoculated for smallpox. It's always smallpox.
Good choice.
But my mother-in-law is totally opposed to it. She believes that injecting my son with cowpox will turn him into a cow. How can I convince my mother-in-law that this procedure is totally safe? Sincerely, poxed by the mother-in-law.
I think it
Right.
I think it depends on how many sons you've got. So how many, spares do you have?
Brutal.
That's a
Anyway.
good question.
Mm.
Yeah.
Brutal.
My suggestion is actually the cowpox vaccine is going to happen. You've decided that. So the issue is dealing with the mother-in-law. May I suggest that you go down to your local apothecary and you purchase a fucking job lot of laudanum. Get that bitch high. Drug your mother-in-law. She will be quite quiet. Quite quiet. She'll be so quiet.
Paige.
Give your mother-in-law smallpox. That is the other option.
Yeah.
In which case, you can then use her smallpox variole cells to variolate your child. You can go fucking old school. Forget the cowpox. Variolate that shit. But alternatively, just drug her. Drug her a big lot.
He's not going to actually turn into a cow, so I think you're probably pretty safe to do it.
Yeah, tell her you're not going to do
without
it.
her
Tell her you're
knowing.
not going to do it, and then just do it. What's she going to do?
Or my argument would be that as it's your mother-in-law, just say, yeah, I don't really care. I'm not interested.
Or have you also considered defenestration?
Or is that just me?
Can you block her?
Can you block her?
You could kick her out of a window and make it like an accident.
What's the medieval equivalent of blocking somebody on social media?
Just don't answer her letters.
Just
defenestration. Chuck her out a window.
Sorted.
Oh yes. Robin Lee says introduce her to the milkmaids who all have the pure as the driven snow skin because they've all had the cowpox. Yeah.
That they have.
Or I tell you, if it's considering the time period, if she's got land, just pay a doctor and have her declared insane and put her in an asylum.
Oh, perfect. Then you get all
then
that
you get her
too.
land.
Yeah.
Wow.
You get her land.
These are great suggestions.
Yeah. Mine are all very aggressive. I'm not sorry.
Aggressive and effective.
Aggressive and well, yes, exactly.
Drugs, window throwing, and then just have her declared insane when she stops.
Yeah. So I think once again, you'll find that with our grace, beauty, poise, wise words, cross-generational experience,
Yeah.
Yes.
We have presented to you a viable set of options.
Pick what you will. We are not
when
liable
I
for any of
say
them.
viable, I mean,
We're
for the
not
love
liable.
of God, don't do any of those things.
We're
But,
not liable.
you know,
If you do any of those things, we are not criminally responsible.
No.
We are not inciting
hang
you to
on.
do that.
You've taken
We are
yours off. Why have
Well,
I got to keep mine on?
I'm not taking mine off. I like it. I don't like the way it goes big. I don't like the
I like the
bigness.
big. It makes my
Do
head
you?
look smaller because my head's fucking massive. It makes my head look less
I
freakish.
feel like
I quite like it. I
from the
quite like it
13th
when it's big.
century. Do you?
I feel like I'm going driving.
Yes.
I feel like I'm
Yes.
driving Miss Daisy.
That's really good.
What's happening?
Yeah.
There we go. You see.
Yeah.
So, oh God, we need a special live stream discussing how Victoria screwed up the world. Oh, that's
Just
the
leave her to rant.
Yeah, me and Philippa are going away for the weekend.
Yeah. Then you can
I will
you
be
can have
here.
Cat
Just
do that.
Just being like, right, this bitch.
Right.
There
Right,
we
we're
go.
done.
Please do send in your party problems postie bags because then we can do that more.
Yeah.
There's gonna be more peeps. We're gonna be doing some more peeps. I'm about to peeps you out. Peeps!
Not him. Hey.
Brop, brop. So I'm gonna do leggy bits. Before I do so, I'm gonna circle back and just have a little chat about the form that the diary took. Because I think Philippa is correct. There's clearly with the binding and the preservation of it, there's evidently an element that he is planning on this being read. But I think by a very, if that's what his intention is, by an incredibly small subset of the population and potentially people that he knows personally. And my reason for saying that is if you take a look at pages from the diary, you will notice that they are in shorthand, a particular kind of shorthand that is designed or created by Thomas Shelton. It's called tachygraphy. And this is a very popular system, but it is one that requires, in much like shorthand, it requires education in use. Pepys, and it's used among educated elite human beings. So Pepys, Isaac Newton, King Charles II, scholars from Cambridge. In fact, we think that Pepys learns to use this tachygraphy while he's at Magdalen, that's where he picks it up. So there's clearly an element to which if there is intended to be an audience, it's a very select audience. And it's an audience that comes from a very similar world to him and potentially knows him. When we talk about Pepys' legacy, I think it's almost impossible to ignore the diary because, as we've spoken about, it really is just this incredibly evocative view into the past. It's a really rare glimpse into this interior life, these thought processes, the frankly, on occasion, craven, feckless, depraved moments that I think are present within all human beings. And there are moments that make us go, oh God, the past is a scary place, like the being cut of the stone, like, going and kissing the corpse of the Queen. We have a visceral response to that. But I think on the flip side of it, there are moments equally when I'm going to get to some Pepys sex testing where we're going to go, mate, can you fucking not?
You just know.
But I also think that there is some profoundly recognizably human things. And when you look at Pepys's diary, I think it's similarly with other corpi of texts, like the Paston letters, things that are intended to be private. This is what it's not, is it's not a chronicle. It's somewhere in between a financial document, what we would call a private diary, and also a chronicle for public consumption. And of course, the private diary thing is going to be really hard for Pepys to do because that's not what people are doing. They aren't, to our knowledge, there's not, if it's happened before, they are no longer extant. But what we are seeing in Pepys is he's writing to himself. And maybe that's it. In writing in this shorthand, he's writing to himself. He's writing something that he values. And I can't think of a diary in that way that predates it. I mean, John Evelyn is writing, he's a diarist. His is a chronicle. His is meant to be read. His is meant to be read by a general public. So Pepys is doing something different, and he's kind of reinventing the wheel, so to speak.
It almost, sorry,
And
just
there
to
is-
jump in, but I was just thinking about what you just said there. It almost reads like how you're encouraged to journal now, so that you don't leave the end
Yeah.
of the day feeling like everything was shit. Because sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes something will have gone, you know, something bad will have happened, but he ends with it. But you know, had a good tea, or had a good dinner, and you know, gone to bed quite happy. So it almost reads like a journaling, like you're
It
encouraged
certainly
to do
does.
now.
It certainly does. It's confessional in almost, you know, in a kind of Protestant word. Is this in a Protestant England? Is this his confession? His remembrances, his desire to vent all of this, and he is somebody. I don't think he's a saint. I think we're going to talk about things in a moment that make it very clear that he's not a saint. I think he is also a man who is in pronounced amounts of pain. I think he has prolonged ill health. I think he has professional success and personal disappointments. I think it makes him bitter and mercurial and overly dramatic on occasion. But there are these moments where you look at Pepys' diary and you go, the past, when they say the past is another country, they do things differently there. Not here. Not here. This is humanity that vibrates with a recognition that I can see and understand. And the moment for me is when we've talked about the fact that Pepys was at the execution of Charles I, that he seems to have celebrated it. And we know that even though it happens before the diary begins, because on the 1st of November 1660, Pepys references this moment. He talks about how he, in sort of preparation potentially for the return of the king, he is spending time with old school friends. And the quote from the diary said, he did remember that I was a great Roundhead, so parliamentarian, when I was a boy. And I was much afraid that he would have remembered the words that I said the day the king was beheaded, that were I to preach upon him, my text should be, quote, the memory of the wicked shall rot. But I found afterwards that he did go away from the school before that time. And I think we've all had that moment where there's an opportunity, or perhaps you've reevaluated, you've changed your mind about someone or a situation, but in the pissy warmth of your youth, you have just fucking run your mouth. You've run your mouth. And you've run your mouth in front of witnesses. We've all had that moment where we've gone, what if that gets reported back? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I shouldn't have disclosed that. And of course, in Pepys' case, there is potentially a very high penalty. But this man who, in his youth, witnesses the execution, who celebrates the execution, is also a man that goes to collect Charles II to bring him back to be King of England, who remains in Charles II's circle. In terms of perhaps where he is most sinning, I think he's most sinning in his personal domestic life. He is, on the one hand, desperately appears to care for his wife. When his wife becomes very ill and she starts vomiting, there's this occasion, he recalls in his diary about his terror that she was sick, that she is just desperate. He's desperate for her to become well again. So there's evident care, but not sufficient care to not cause her the emotional pain and shame of fucking her mates, of wherever he can possibly get his willy wet, just like a rat up a drain pipe doing it. There are also accounts of him being violent towards serving staff, of beating servants. Now, do you know what? I'm never going to be a person that goes, but it's of the time. What do I think that other people aren't beating their servants? No. Do I think that other people aren't cheating on their wives? No. But we're talking about this guy, and he was doing those things, and both of those are dick things to do. What's also the prime example of modernity smacking us in the face is Pepys, despite the fact that he is a notorious shagger, cheating on his wife left, right, and centre, this prick is inveterately jealous of her. Inveterately jealous. He says she has this dancing master. Poor cow, she wants a bit of joy. She has this dancing master to come to the house to teach her in the kind of new fashionable dances. Pepys decides they are knocking each other off. And this one thing that she loves, and even if he was knocking her off, you're knocking off everybody. Just let her have this one thing. No, Pepys can't do that. So he basically makes it so that he makes it so uncomfortable that she has to stop seeing him. Beforehand, he's been really unkind about her attempts to dance. He's talked about how she is conceited about how well she does it. The hypocrisy of this man calling anyone fucking arrogant is wild to me. But he says she thinks she's brilliant, but I don't think she's very good. But also, it makes it so that these dancing lessons that she clearly enjoyed and they clearly gave her joy came to an end. In terms of, I just want to skip to a little bit about the quotation with the dirty bits. Let me see if I can find it.
While you're looking at that pretty, or was it page? He really thought with his downstairs brain a lot.
He did. He certainly did.
I like that.
So, on the 25th of October, 1668, Elizabeth walks in to find her husband embracing her maid, Deborah Willett. And as we talked about, if you look at Pepys' diary, there's an ellipsis there. So when you see an ellipsis, that lets you know that they've taken something out. And that is because they are using the 1893 Wheatley edition, because that's a copyright-free version of the text. But in doing so, Wheatley cuts out some bits that are vulgar. But if we go into the notes, we can see that what he has said, the full text reads as follows. So home and to dinner, and after dinner, all the afternoon, got my wife and boy to read to me. And at night, W. Batelier comes and sups with us. And after supper, to have my head combed by Deb, which occasioned which occasioned the greatest sorrow to me that I ever knew in the world. For my wife coming up suddenly, I'm wondering if having my head combed is a euphemism for getting knocked off. For my wife coming up suddenly did find me embracing the girl, and then he has this kind of Latinate thing, con as in with my hand, sub su underneath her coats. So with my hand under her coats. And indeed, I was with my hand in her cunny. We all know what cunny means. I was at a wonderful loss upon it. And the girl also, I'm sure, babes, your wife wasn't best pleased either, you tosser. Anyway, the maid then gets fired. So obviously Samuel's like, I'm sorry I made my wife sad. So what I'm going to do is make a poor woman who I have clearly fucking taken advantage of unemployed. However, he does continue to pursue the girl. And I'm assuming, I hope in some way, fund her life. After the diary leaves us, let me just hoppity to that. Let me go to that because I don't want to run over massively over time. So just skip. We've also talked about the kissing of the Queen. And also when there's one occasion as well when he's in church and he starts trying to fondle some parishioner who he doesn't seem to know. He thinks she gives him the eye. He basically thinks she looked at me So I went over, and then he was like, but I was scared she's going to stab me with her hat pin. Babe, in which case, you know.
You should have gone over then. And then she could have
Stop
stabbed
it.
you with your hat pin and done the world a favour. Well,
So-
no, that's a tricky one.
Mhm.
In his last entry, he appears utterly terrified at the thought that he's going to go blind.
Mm.
Maybe he thinks that there's some kind of divine punishment, because at this point, he finally stops trying to finger his wife's maid. The diary ends. After some months of rest, Pepys' eyes do seem to get a bit better. His wife dies on the 10th of November, 1669. He does not remarry. What we don't see, because we don't get the diary, is we miss him running for and being elected as the Member of Parliament for Harwich in 1679. We also miss him falling out with people. I don't think Pepys is an easy man to get on with. I don't think he is. I think he's an arrogant, and
I think he's all right
he's in
if
just a
you're
drinking
also
partner,
yeah, I
really.
think if you're also up for just getting pissed and having futile conversations, then
but I
whilst
think he's
pissed.
also somebody who thinks he's
Politicians.
he thinks he's perhaps smarter than he is, and he is a smart man. I think he's arrogant, and I think it lands him in trouble. So he, as we talked about, he's very much involved with the Navy, but start of 1679, he is accused of leaking naval secrets to the French, and he's also accused of being a papist. This leads to him being imprisoned in the Tower of London. He is imprisoned from May to July 1679. He does, though, although the main diary that we know and that we talk about is one that spans from 1660 to 1669, and there are, in fact, other diaries. They're much shorter, and they are very much focused on his work life. He keeps a diary for a few months in 1683. At this point, he's sent to Tangier, because he is by then one of the most senior civil servant in the Navy, and this is a return to public life for him after being imprisoned in the Tower. So he does come to make good again. In 10th of June 1684, he, by letters patent, is made the Secretary for the Affairs of the Admiralty of England. On the 1st of December 1684, he is elected as the President of the Royal Society, a recognition of his dedication to, I assume, to lifelong learning and to the furthering of knowledge. And his library, the bindings, there is an element to which there is an element to which being a collector is becoming more and more of a thing in the Stuart and later into the Georgian period. And collecting books and binding them in attractive ways and having a room, this is a way of displaying its conspicuous consumption in a way that people recognize. It speaks to who you are. I think Pepys enjoys learning, but let's be very clear that there are plenty of people of his generation and older who buy a shitload of books, have them all bound in their kind of personal branding, and never crack open one of them. But they decorate libraries beautifully. So Pepys is still alive when James II takes the throne. In fact, at this point, Pepys becomes chief of the naval staff. He then gets to go to a second coronation. So Pepys, by now, let's just keep track, has witnessed a king be executed. He's witnessed 2 coronations. He has seen plague, and he's also seen London burn. And the Great Fire is... The thing for me that's so striking is that they talk about how the roof of St. Paul's, which is lead, the fire gets so hot that the roof of St. Paul's starts running through the street. There is just molten lead running through the streets of London. At the coronation of James II, he is now a baron of the Cinque Ports, and this means that he gets to carry a canopy over the king. So if we think back to the coronation we've just witnessed, Penny Mordaunt's sword behaviour, he's doing a similar role. If there was a televised version of James II's coronation, we'd be like, and there is Samuel Pepys. Now Baron of the Cinque Ports, leading member of the Navy, carrying the canopy over the king.
In that exact voice. That's
That is how I'm talking to you from the BBC. So that is what's happening. Anyway,
Making
so
it
as I'm sure we all know, James II is deposed. We talked about this last week. Warming pan baby, etc. Pepys is still alive. So Pepys has seen an execution of king, 2 coronations, and a deposition, a foreign invasion,
an entire
in the name
republic
of
experiment.
Of course, he saw republicanism. Also, he saw the Cromwellian interregnum, and then he also sees the Glorious Revolution. He is still knocking around in Parliament. However, when James II's daughter Mary and her cousin husband William accede to the throne following the Glorious Revolution, he is removed from his naval duties because he is suspected, or he is detained as a suspect of treason. He is then imprisoned in Westminster Gatehouse in 1690, allegedly because a French fleet turns up in the Channel and they think somehow Pepys is back to passing messages, maybe. He is then let out of prison about just under a month later because of medical reasons. He's got gallstones again, and he's also his vision is really failing. So that is 1690. Seeps. Seepy Seeps, that cheese fancier, passes away on the 26th of May, 1703. He is 70 years old. And he, at his request, is buried next to his wife Elizabeth. Can you fucking imagine? I'd be livid if I was her. Elizabeth's like, put me next to the dancing master. Keep this gouty meat sack away. So he is buried beside his wife Elizabeth at St Olave's. And yes, I think the legacy that we get principally is the narrative in that diary. That is the legacy he leaves us. The question we're going to have to, I think, come to is, and we will come to this when we do our roundup week. The question we're all going to have to face and consider is, does the wealth of information that comes from the diary, and let's be clear, it is an insight into that period in the 1600s that we would not have otherwise. We see behind the veil, we see the peculiar peccadillos. Does that make up for the the objectively shitty stuff that he does to those closest to him? And I can't answer that for you, but I'm sure we will.
And also, of course, we don't have accounts for the people's behaviour. We have no context. Not saying it absolves him, but we have no context as to anyone else's behaviour. We don't know her behaviour. I mean, we just don't know. We know him because he's left us with that.
We don't know.
She could have been up to all sorts with that dancing instructor.
We don't know.
What I will say is that what I will say is that he doesn't sanitize. He doesn't sanitize his account of himself, which points to me that he perhaps didn't plan on lots of people reading it. He planned a very select group of maybe not many at all. So there is that element to which we are seeing his opinion of himself, which obviously no one wants to be the bad guy, but at least he could just leave out the fact that he's fingering his wife's maid when she walks in. He could leave that out. He hasn't got to say it.
Someone did say.
Right. Well, because he rewrites it, doesn't he? He has sort of scribbles and then he writes it in neat. He writes it up in neat. So there is a chance there to edit, rethink, and
doesn't seem to.
Doesn't seem
clearly.
To.
He keeps it in. It survives.
I wonder whether he thinks
it's late
it's
editors take it out.
You know, like we talked about Sarah Churchill and her book that she has published about the Green Book, where it's all her children, you know, the
sins,
how badly they've treated her. Whether he sort of just thinks it's, I don't know, that his perspective on it is so different, warped perhaps.
I don't think he finds it amusing that his wife catches him. I think he's genuinely sad, mortified to have caused her pain. I think he's genuinely feels guilty about it. Some of the other stuff that's fucked up. He is going
Margaret put a lot further up. Could it be that this man Pepys is just bragging and making things up to paint himself as a sex machine? And a couple of people like that.
for. Possibly, but the sex he talks about having is really like, it doesn't sound. He's not. It's not fucking Casanova. He is trying to he's trying to grope a tit of a stranger in church. No.
I'm not laughing because that's funny. I'm just laughing because of the way you went. It's like, yeah, like that does not paint you as some sort of like.
He's not Mr. Lover. He's not. He's Mr. Fucking keep your hands to yourself. Put your hands in your pockets, right?
Well, keep your hands on the Bible or whatever you're supposed to do when you're in church.
Yeah.
Pretty Pete sounds like he'd be horrible in bed.
Well, I mean,
you'd hope he'd learn some skills. He's going to do.
He has got a separating store by his arsehole, so there's that as well. Can you imagine if you grab his bumhole and you're like, hang on, what am I fingering?
What if he's like actually not able? So he's just one of these, like, you know, some people just get a bit pervy when they're not able.
Just thumbs it in.
They get a bit gropey.
Gropey.
Instead.
Do you know what?
Sometimes are following
there's a part of me. There's a part of me that thinks that if you met Pete, if you were sat behind you in church, he'd be the bloke that goes
sniff your hair or something.
Oh no!
Just getting a little bit too
He's
close.
A sniffer.
He's a sniffer.
Do you think that there is a chance that the operation of saying Nobel made him sterile? Could it have made him?
Surely there's a possibility it made him
sterile,
or I mean, it sounds horrendous.
He's talking about groping and putting his hands up skirts. Like, maybe he's impotent. Maybe
that's what I'm thinking. Is perhaps I mean, we're completely surmising here, people. We're not. We have no evidence for
anyone of anything. Or just like
I'm accusing him of not keeping his dick in his pants, or not keeping his hands
in his pockets.
Trousers.
It has to be a little bit inappropriate, a little bit too much of the touchy-feelies.
Yes, he should have touchy-feelied himself and left people alone, particularly in church. That's rank. So that's what I have. That's what I have for you.
Yes, because there's never been any inappropriate.
No, let's not go there.
No, let's not go there. Let's not go there. Nearly a yeet.
At least,
but you are not wrong.
Wheezy Pepys at least didn't have any offspring to be embarrassed by his escapades. That's true.
That we know of.
Well,
that we know.
Yeah.
He didn't have any offspring with his wife. But if he's not impotent, and if he is, also not infertile, because Elizabeth she's also very unwell. She also has multiple health conditions. It is possible that Pete does have children we don't know about because he may not acknowledge them while he's, knocking off half of fucking Southwark. He may well have, diddled a fair few maids and knocked them up.
But also though, Philippa's theory would also explain why he got so angry about the dancing instructor, because maybe he thought he can give her something I can't.
Yeah, actual
rhythm.
Who could ask for anything more?
He was concerned that there is a man who actually knows what rhythm is, so it won't just be like somebody coming in collywomple and slapping at me.
If he actually can't, if he's only got collywomple,
nicely shoehorned
Cathy Womple, even if it's only ever Cathy
Womple sex, where it's like that kind of. It's just there's just no rhythm. There's just no rhythm.
There's no anything. It's
a sadness.
It's there, but not there.
Calm.
But yeah.
Intrepid Freddy says, imagine if he was on social media. We don't have to imagine if he was on social media.
That's the equivalent of social media in the 17th century.
He's literally every man with a microphone on social media. She says, holding a tiny microphone. We know what he's like. He is every 22-year-old guy who's telling you about how you can get yourself a sports car and how, if you want to be taken seriously, buy yourself a £10,000 watch. Babe, if you want to be taken seriously by people who've got Patek Philippe's, that ain't gonna cut it.
He'd have a podcast.
Yeah, he would definitely have a podcast. He'd have a podcast,
and he would get the king on to have a little chat over a whiskey or something. That'd be hilarious.
And he'd be like just insufferably smoking jackety.
Do you think on his
podcast?
How he spoke? Oh yeah.
if he today, he'd speak with a Mockney accent.
Mm.
Like you'd think he was in layer cake. Shades of Guy Ritchie. In my head, he would be directed by Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
I
That'd
see
be-
what you mean.
That'd be cool. Maybe we should contact
He's
him.
also exactly the sort of person who, if he would after university, he would have gone and found himself in India.
Oh my god.
Trustafarian.
Zoe on Instagram said he'd be in everyone's DMs.
He would be a dick
blocked.
pic
He would.
king.
He
wouldn't
would.
realize,
The king of unsolicited dick pics.
but he wouldn't realize that you're supposed to have a boner. So it'd just be his like sad little slug, sad, flaccid,
Just
seeps.
Cassie Wampus
seeps.
just lying there.
Cassie
just...
Wampus looking at you askance, just bereft.
Yeah.
He's a man with a bereft penis.
No, must not
so
lose the plot.
sad.
Must not lose the
So
plot.
sad.
Must not.
Bereft.
Must not lose the plot. Bereft penis.
We probably should start to wrap up because it's got to that point.
We broken Catherine. Have we broken
Yeah.
her?
Right, Philippa.
Yeah.
What's happening next week?
I don't know. Is it is
You're the only grown up here. We can't be trusted. We look like a state
let me just
Catherine's dead. I'm me.
I want to double check what's happening next week. Give me a chance. I have a spreadsheet. Of course I do.
I thought it was Roundup week next week.
It is
That's what I
Roundup
thought
week.
too,
Yeah.
but-
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to check. It is Roundup week next week. Yeah. So we'll be covering we will be covering let me just go back. So we have Sarah Churchill.
Pepys.
Well, Pepys,
Sarah
clearly.
Churchill.
Sarah Churchill, Warwick the Kingmaker, and William of Orange.
So 3 Stuarts and a bell and a pear tree. There's no pear tree involved. I've made that up. But 3 Stuarts and Warwick the Kingmaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I know who's going to come
So
out
it's
on
cool.
top of them 4.
Do you? I don't know. I think it could be a scandalo.
I think
Scandalo.
I think I might know actually.
Yeah.
We'll see. Depends what riles people at the most.
Truth.
But yeah,
Truth and
so
facts. Philippa, tell us about all the things you normally tell us about.
so I can't remember, what do I normally tell you about? So you
things that
you
go
can-
across the bottom.
things that go across the bottom. So if you haven't already, please sign up to our Substack. It's historyafterdarkhub.substack.com. So that's historyafterdarkhub.substack.com, because that's where we will eventually start emailing you from. So please do. And also
We're going to get there.
We are.
We are going to get
You
there.
can't do
And of
everything all
course-
at once. We're saving some of the good stuff for another time.
Absolutely. Now you can, of course, support us. We don't have a Patreon yet. People were putting in the comments earlier about Patreon. We'll see. But at the moment, you can support us at Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/had podcast. Bit of a teaser. We haven't got a podcast. There you go. Help you
Maybe
remember it.
one
Buy
day.
This is it. This is what you got. This is the podcast.
Oh, but you
It's got our
can
faith in it.
Philippa has
Actually-
arranged it. Yes.
Yes, you're right.
She's done
I have.
something
I've
fabulous.
actually, you can now get the podcast on YouTube as a podcast. So that is
yeah.
actually possible.
So it's now a podcast.
It is now a podcast. So that will help. So buymeacoffee.com/had podcast. That is helping us buy the Winnebago, the sausage rolls, the tea, everything that
The marmalade
contributes
with
to
bits
Catherine.
in.
Marmalade with bits in.
The,
Because
Oh,
it should never
that
be
hanging
without.
upside downy thing that stretches your spine, the thing that we're going to strap Catherine into upside down by her ankles
Yeah.
and swing her around. That those kind of spine extenders they have.
Oh,
that you,
This is actually
float. You know the one.
getting
I
worse
think that
by the
sounds quite
moment.
good, actually. I'll go in there for fun and put Catherine in those. But, no!
I don't.
No!
I
And then
nearly
we'll
told you
drive so
something
that it
else I didn't
swings
like.
around.
Nah, I nearly told you something else I didn't like then, but now I'm not because you'll do it.
Of course we will.
You'll
We'll
tell
get
us
it. Yeah, we'll
eventually.
get it out. Yeah,
You will fold like laundry.
We'll get it
You
out,
will
yeah.
tell us.
no problem.
We'll get it out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Well, Roundup week again already. Okay,
Mm.
well, thank you all so much, everybody. If you only follow us on YouTube, please consider going down and joining us on Instagram, which is history.after.dark, where you sometimes get a little bit of extra content. And you can also join us on our close friends, which you can do via hadpodcast.com/whatever it was.
It's buymeacoffee.com/podcast.
So not what I said. No,
It's in the link
it's
tree.
in the link
It's in the
tree,
link
which
tree.
is on our Instagram. So if you are on Instagram, thank you so much for coming down. Please do consider following us down at the YouTubes, History After Dark. And if anybody follows us on YouTube, please also think of liking, subscribing, hitting the bell button, sharing our posts, leaving the comments, doing all the things that help us with the other things, because it all helps my therapy bill after the Winnebago has been paid for.
It's all right.
Yes.
You'll be fine.
On that note,
Yeah.
so thank you very much for
Break you in.
coming down. Is there anything else, ladies? Have we covered all the bases?
We love you long
I
time.
think we have.
Love you, love you.
We should mention. Yeah, we have a private Zoom call tomorrow night, don't we? Because a lovely
we
lady
do.
Oh,
has
yes.
has booked us for. I mean, you can do that through Buy Me a Coffee. Yeah, so that's going to be fabulous. So we're talking to Andrea tomorrow night. Hopefully, will be useful.
Wish her luck.
Yeah, wish her luck.
I'm going to have a coffee beforehand.
Yeah, we'll wake up.
Oh,
It's late
dear.
here.
It's going to be because she lives somewhere nicer than us.
She does. She lives in sunny California, I think it is. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm not jealous. All right
Jealous
then.
and sunshine.
I know,
Definitely.
exactly. It is crap here. Crap, I tell you. Right. Kat, are you counting us out? Because we love to
I
finish
am.
at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's always important to make sure everybody finishes if we're having a party together. It's going to go 3, 2, 1.
Bye.